So, guys, thank you for listening to another episode of It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. We're gonna kind of do a little casual after show talk here. Thank you so much to Mark Claire for being on the show. I really appreciated him sitting down and taking the time to talk with us. We had actually planned like a week or two in advance to do a no politics show. We were going to talk about comics. We were going to talk. We were going to have a good time. We were going to take a week off from politics. And Suzanne, you and I and Mike Meharry had actually talked about maybe next week we would talk about the SCOTUS opening and all that stuff. And so, but this week, no politics. And then literally this afternoon, and I hate to ruin it for everybody, but we do record the show and then premiere it live. And when we were recording, they were like an hour out from the announcements about the indictments for the officer involved with the Breonna Taylor murder. And so we didn't talk about that on the show, not really in earnest. But I figured, I don't want it to be like a week late to get around to it. So I invited Suzanne Sherman. It's our resident law expert of It's Too Late with Alan Mosley. Suzanne Sherman of Suzanne Sherman's The Wasatch Report. Suzanne, bless your heart for
Alan.
taking on this challenge.
This is really sad. We had talked about this when this unfortunate incident first happened back in March. We said, imagine what's going to happen now if one of these cops doesn't go to jail, one or more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think pretty much the worst outcome we could imagine for purposes of civil unrest has happened. And right when we were talking before we went on the air, I was just looking at some of the news reports. And so far, 3 police officers have been shot already. And as you mentioned to me when we were talking this afternoon, get your atlas out and wipe Louisville off the map.
Yeah, you don't need to have that on there. Our friend Mike Meharry, when I had asked him what was going on up there, all he said was Louisville was a nice town. Was being the key word. So yeah, I don't want to spend our little after show here speculating too much on what's going on right this second on the streets, because you know how that is. Right. It's a lot of conjecture, but I have heard multiple accounts of multiple officers having already been shot, not had bags thrown at them, been shot. And we're gonna get into that a little bit about how I think a lot of this was quite predictable. So maybe we'll start off at the top, Suzanne. We'll do a recap of what actually happened the night of March 13th in Louisville, Kentucky, as it pertains to Breonna Taylor and the Louisville PD. But let's kind of start off with today of Louisville's boarding up the windows. The courthouse is on lockdown. They're instituting a curfew. They're calling in the guard. Everyone hears the announcement about the grand jury indictment is going to be today. Right before we even say another word, is how the city of Louisville reacted not a giant red flag that they're getting ready to give the people some bad news?
Oh, absolutely. And I love to talk about preparedness and survival. And one of the number one rules of survival is get out of the way. If I had a home in the city limits there, I would board it up, get my belongings, would have already been out, and I would be nowhere near that area. It's a really sad situation, but you got to get out of there.
So the charges that come in, so there was 3 officers that were involved in the killing of Breonna Taylor at her apartment on March 13th. The two officers, Sergeant John Mattingly and Detective Miles Cosgrove, were not charged. That doesn't mean not charged in Breonna Taylor's murder specifically. They were charged with nothing at all, no charges. One of the 3, and by the way, those 2 officers were still on the force. The 3rd officer, Detective Brett Hankinson, we'll say Hankinson. He had been fired from the force due to negligence, but he was charged. But he wasn't charged with murder 1. Wasn't charged with murder 2. And I know you and I have discussed the importance of the murder charge as it pertains to other people, such as the George Floyd killing. But there was no debate between you and me over murder 1 or murder 2, because his charge was wanton endangerment. So for people at home, wanton endangerment means you were just a little bit too zealous in the line of duty. It holds up to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Suzanne, was this the right charge, and are people going to be content with that or not?
Oh, it was such a crazy day. Things just I don't mean to be light of it, but she's, here we're talking about wanton recklessness. And what happened was, I guess he fired 10
Mhm.
shots, and I think into the neighbor's apartment and missed somebody. He almost shot somebody in the
Mhm.
head. And the number, when you're trained in firearms, I used to be an NRA certified firearms instructor. The number one rule is know your target and what's beyond.
Mhm.
Clearly, that did not happen here. I think he was firing the shots from outside, if I remember correctly. And to fire 10 shots when you don't even have a target that's been acquired is absolutely reckless. But where it gets kind of nitty gritty here is none of his shots hurt anybody, nor did he fire the fatal shot that killed Breonna Taylor.
Mhm.
The officer, that was what was his name? Oh, Detective Miles
Yes.
Cosgrove. He fired the fatal shot.
Mhm.
However, that shot, and we'll get into this in a little bit, was completely justified. So he killed her, but it was ruled a justified shooting.
Now, just to be clear, I don't think you're saying it was completely justified. The state of Kentucky says it's completely justified, which are
Correct. My opinion
yeah,
doesn't matter. The state of Kentucky's
yeah.
matters here, and what they decided was
Mhm.
because the officers were fired at by, and we'll get into this as well, Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend. They were in bed sleeping at the time,
Mhm.
um, because they were fired upon from within the decedent's home
Yes.
in the middle of the
Mhm.
night. The shooting was justified nonetheless. And as I was reading to you just before we went on the air, somebody said to me, Suzanne, he doesn't deserve to win a civil lawsuit. He deserves to go to prison for the rest of his life because he shot at a cop. We're going to get into that. Did he do the right thing? Was there a better way to handle it? Was there a better way to address a narcotics arrest? Because when you were on my show yesterday, we were talking about Justice Ginsburg
Mhm.
and how she actually got some stuff right on the Fourth Amendment. And one of the cases that she referred to here was out of Kentucky as well. And here, what she said in her dissenting opinion, was in no quarter does the Fourth Amendment apply with greater force than in our homes, our most private space, which for centuries has been regarded as entitled to special protection. When I first started hearing about this concept when I was a kid, I was told, yeah, back before we declared independence from England, the crown, their men could go in and knock down doors and in the middle of the night and drag you out and kill you. Well, what's changed? Now all of a sudden we're okay with it.
Yeah, so they weren't allowed to do that for about 6 months, and then they went back to doing it.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
so I'm gonna read like a quick little summary here that talks about the actual events of March 13th, and then a little bit of some of the kind of summary information around it. So Breonna Taylor, 26-year-old African American woman, was fatally shot by Louisville Metro Police Department. Officers Jonathan Mattingly, Brett Hankinson, and Miles Cosgrove. That's March 13th of this year. So that was three plainclothes officers. Now allegedly they were wearing vests that said police, but there's a couple things to remember. One, they were in unmarked cars. Two, they were wearing plain clothes. Three, guess what they weren't wearing, Suzanne? They weren't wearing
Cameras.
body cameras. Imagine that. But we'll continue. They entered her apartment in Louisville, Kentucky, executing a no-knock search warrant. According to the New York Times, while the department had gotten court approval for a no-knock entry, the orders were changed before the raid to knock and announce, meaning that the police had to identify themselves. According to the police account, and it's so important to talk about who says what, because there's so many memes out there by the thin blue liners of, well, I heard one person said one time that the cop said this, therefore that is what happened. But you know what? There's people that don't agree with that. So, according to the police account and one witness at the scene, the officers knocked and announced their identity before forcing entry. But the police and the witness differ as to how they announced themselves. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, and 11 other witnesses deny that the officers announced themselves at all. Walker and the officers exchanged gunfire. Walker had said that he believed the officers were intruders. The officers fired over 20 shots. Taylor was shot 5 times, according to her death certificate. The LMPD Sergeant Jonathan Mattingly was injured by gunfire. Another officer and an LMPD lieutenant were on the scene when the warrant was executed. Now, there's just at this point in the story, there's a couple of things to really put the emphasis on. So, multiple eyewitnesses report seeing unmarked cars pull up with three plainclothes men walking up to the apartment. There's no way for these people to know these are police officers at this point. They're not wearing body cameras. The police claim that they knocked and announced themselves 3 times and then kicked in the door with a battering ram. Now, Kenneth Walker, Breonna Taylor's girlfriend, claims that he and Breonna had rushed to the hallway because they heard the banging at the door and had heard no announcement of who it was. So they assumed it was an intruder, and Kenneth Walker went to go grab his gun to fire at the intruders breaking through the door. Now, it is true that there is one witness that said that they thought they heard the police announce, but only announced as they were kicking in the door. 11 other witnesses, not counting Walker, said that they made no announcement. But here's the last little kibosh on that. The official police report was that they had knocked and announced themselves 3 times. So every single eyewitness account, the 11 who said no announcements and Walker, and even the one witness that said they did announce, none of those accounts line up with the official police report. How much does that matter, Suzanne?
I think it matters quite a bit. Let's take the scenario from maybe the worst case scene from Kenneth Walker.
Okay.
Let's say they did announce and he simply didn't hear it. I think this illustrates an inherent problem in these late night knock raids, because it's entirely feasible that perhaps they did knock from Kenneth Walker's standpoint and he did not hear it. So from that perspective, they were correct, but that still doesn't address the issue of the other witnesses, including the ones that are suing the city because their home was shot up. But that was only, I think, 3. So we still have 8 that are not involved, have no dog in this game, that said, no, there was no announcement. And you also have to understand, well, let's see, it was her time of death was listed at 12:48. Let's assume it was relatively quiet in the neighborhood at that time. Let's assume also it's not unreasonable to think that there's probably some people that are still awake at that hour, and they likely would have heard had there been knocking and, right before the door was kicked down, because we know they don't just quietly say, hello, so can we come in? They bang on that door and they yell, it's the police. I can't imagine nobody would have heard that if they had done so.
Yes, exactly right. So there's a couple of other little pieces of information that I want to go over before we get back to some of your notes and some of the memes that are floating around. So the primary targets of the investigation. So what were they doing? Why did this happen? Primary targets of the investigation were Jamarcus Glover and Adrian Walker, who were suspected of selling controlled substances from a drug house more than 10 miles away. Now, it's very important to point out Jamarcus Glover was Breonna Taylor's ex-boyfriend. But when we say ex-boyfriend, we don't mean last week. We mean over 2 years ago. The second thing, a lot of people have seized on Adrian Walker being a part of the document saying he's a part of this drug conspiracy. Adrian Walker happens to have the last name of Kenneth Walker, her current boyfriend who was involved in the shooting. They are not related. So
and what we've seen the meme geniuses using is that argument that, Walker, the first name doesn't matter. He was a black dude named Walker. That's close enough.
Yes, exactly. So these people are totally unrelated. So let's just get that out there right now. According to the Taylor family attorney, Glover had dated Taylor 2 years before and continued to have a passive friendship. The search warrant did include Taylor's residence because it was suspected that Glover received packages containing drugs at Taylor's apartment, and because a car registered to Taylor had been seen parked in front of Glover's house. Again, it's not exactly weird to have seen Taylor's car parked in front of Glover's house because they had been dating 2 years prior. Specifically, the warrant alleges that in January 2020, Glover left Taylor's apartment with an unknown package, presumed to be drugs. By the way, how does that go in court, Suzanne? I just presume your package has drugs in it.
Well, the wording of the Fourth Amendment does require that you have to have a little bit more of a indicia of reliability and some, particularity with what you're looking for. But just to say, well, we think there might be drugs,
Yes.
so we're going to get a warrant, and for a judge to sign off on that
So,
is a ludicrous
so I'm
assumption.
going to hit you with some hot government on government action. Are you ready for this? The warrant states that this event was verified, quote, through a U.S. postal inspector. In May 2020, the U.S. Postal Inspector in Louisville publicly announced that the collaboration with law enforcement had never actually occurred. Suzanne, how can they possibly say in their documents when they went to get this warrant that they had cooperated with U.S. Postal Inspector and said that there was some sort of trafficking going on, then for the U.S. Postal Service and Inspector to come out and say, they're lying, that never happened, we didn't collaborate with Louisville PD? That seems like a giant red flag to me.
If you or I filed a false police report, I don't think we'd get away with it.
No, I don't think we would. There's a lot of parts of this whole story where I just can't help but think that if we were already at trial and this was our defense, they're hanging us, right? Like, it's over. It's over for us.
Right. And the thing is, too, assuming that nobody had been killed and some drugs had been found, there's so much stuff to go by here and have the motion, have the evidence suppressed just based on that alone.
So here's the last little bit. The post office stated that they were actually asked to monitor packages going to Taylor's apartment from a different agency. And you know what? They did. And then they concluded, no packages of interest going there. So this public revelation put the investigation, and especially the warrant, into question and has resulted in an internal investigation. Side note, no drugs or any drug paraphernalia was found in Taylor's apartment after the warrant was executed. So there's a couple of other inconvenient truths that we want to get in here before we move on. So Kenneth Walker was her boyfriend at the time. Inconvenient for the Louisville PD, Kenneth Walker survived his engagement with the police, so he's still around to tell his story. He's the one that, believing that intruders were breaking in, ran to grab his gun. He fired a shot at the doorway. It did hit one of the officers in the leg, which resulted in the officers returning fire that ultimately killed Breonna Taylor. Kenneth Walker was a licensed gun owner, Suzanne. This wasn't some random gangbanger with a piece off the street with the numbers filed off. This was a registered legal gun owner with no criminal record. Suzanne, this is the NRA's hero, right?
Should be.
I mean, one would think he's doing what he's meant to with he's done. He did everything right, as they would say. By the way, a couple of other things we want to point out. The police originally did file charges against Kenneth Walker, but that case was dismissed. They ultimately decided that he was not at fault for this series of events. However, Breonna Taylor's family, of course, did file a suit against the city of Louisville. The city of Louisville paid up big time. Of course, while I'm happy that Breonna Taylor's family won, ultimately they won / they settled out of court on this lawsuit to the tune of $12 million. We also are a little bit sad because we know the city of Louisville won't miss a dime of that money. It's going to be paid for by the taxpayers of the city of Louisville.
Right.
So the city of Louisville settles out of court with Breonna Taylor's family, apologizing for the excessive force that led to Breonna Taylor's death, and also pledge a variety of different programs to be instituted within their police departments to help something like this never happen again, along with paying the family $12 million. So I'm gonna kind of leave you a hypothetical here and let you hit us with some of the legal knowledge that laymen like me don't have. Seems like someone on the street is just following this story, and logically they're thinking, how is it that two parties shot at each other that night? One party shooting at the cops and hitting one in the leg, the cops shooting at them and blowing away a woman, and yet somehow no one's at fault, and at the same time, the city can pay her family $12 million and apologize, and then say the cops were totally in the right.
Well, and this is what was so strange about the settlement out of court, and this is what happens frequently when civil lawsuits are settled like this: is the defendant party will pay, but then they will also admit no wrongdoing, and that's exactly what they did here. But if they did nothing wrong, interestingly enough, as of June of 2020, now they all are required to wear body cameras and have them on. And by the way, Trisha, our good friend Trisha, mentioned this as well. If you were going to be in a position where you could put yourself at significant risk, liability wise, or provide evidence to fellow officers should they become injured, why in the world would you not want to have that recorded?
Yes. Yes, exactly right. I agree completely. Um, so a couple of other things I want to get into here because I know you've got a lot of notes. You tagged me in a meme, and by the way, never do that again. You tagged me in a meme. So this was the I gotcha from the Thin Blue Line. I hope
Yes.
everyone's sitting down. So it reads, first of all, the truth about Breonna Taylor. Number one, she wasn't an EMT. She was terminated in 2017.
Then kill her, by all means.
Then kill that bitch, am I right? How dare you be
Yeah.
terminated?
She had it coming.
So to that point right there, I had already commented previously. So there actually is a statement on that in one of the news articles. So the attorneys for Taylor's family had clarified that she was actually working as an ER technician at the time of her death at March 13th, with aspirations of becoming a nurse. So we'll save the big bomb for later on, but we'll just say for number one, I'm sorry, she wasn't an EMT. I don't know anything about being terminated. I know she quit a job, but she was working as an ER tech. So I guess that's fake news. She wasn't an EMT. She was an ER tech. Number two, she was knee deep in criminal/drug dealing activities with her ex-boyfriend. I just don't know where these cocksuckers get this stuff, Suzanne. So again, as I had commented previously, Breonna Taylor was not suspected of anything. Breonna Taylor has no criminal record. She was not under investigation for drug dealing in any way. Neither Taylor nor her boyfriend, who is not related to the ex, by the way, I want to emphasize that again, have any record whatsoever. There's no evidence of drugs, none found at her home, and no investigation into said facts. So we'll just chalk that one up to just pure on right-wing retardation. But we'll move on. Number three. She was on jailhouse recordings running drugs for her ex-boyfriend. All right, I'm going to take a break, Suzanne. Let you get in here.
Where are those recordings?
What else can the jailhouse recordings tell us? Did they know who shot Kennedy?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, if that was the case, was she even on the warrant? I guess it had her house on there. I don't even remember that part. I just know they were there in the middle of the night looking for the drugs. I think we discussed that this afternoon. I'm having a hard time unwrapping all this.
So in the documents related to the drug investigation of Glover and Adrian Walker, she is not named in the investigation, and Glover himself has said she had nothing to do with that. And they tried to give him a plea deal if he would name her as a co-conspirator, to which he said no thanks, because that's not true. So that's just...
But they would have been okay if he lied anyway.
Oh, of course. Number four. She was under surveillance for months running drugs. So again, to reference from number 2 and 3, that's just simply not true. This is just a meme with no references whatsoever. That's simply incorrect. So this actually harkens back to our previous conversation about the postal office inspector. So first of all, the postal office inspector denies the official police report, and what activity they did do concluded that she had nothing to do with anything. So we'll move on. Number 5, she was on the warrant, as was her car and apartment. So her address was on the warrant. This is true. That address, along with a couple of other addresses, were on the warrant to search for drug paraphernalia, and if they found drugs, large amounts of cash, weapons, that they would be seized. Of course, remember, after all of this went down and after she had died, of course, they still searched her apartment. Guess what? Nada.
Nothing.
Next to last one, the officers did in fact knock and announce despite obtaining a no-knock exception on the warrant. So we've already discussed that ad nauseum. Imagine that, Suzanne. The people accused of murder say, "Nuh-uh, we didn't do it." Imagine that. But as we've pointed out, every eyewitness except for one says that's not how it went down. And even the one who disagrees with their accounts still doesn't agree with the official police report. And finally, last one. Breonna's boyfriend fired at officers, striking an officer. Officers fired back, and Breonna took the shots. She was not asleep in her bed. So, according to these bootlickers, so because she was awake instead of asleep in her bed, I guess it's just open fucking season.
Moral of the story, if somebody breaks down your door in the middle of the night, hide under the covers, put your head under the pillow, and pray it's not home invaders out there to murder you. Because if it's the cops and you try and defend your home, you deserve to be killed. End of story.
Yeah, exactly that. So ultimately, I just kind of want to put the finishing touches on that little meme that's circulating around by saying, for one, it's all bullshit. But I think you and I will agree. I don't want to speak for you. I'll let you speak for yourself. That even if all of those things were true, that does not give the officers carte blanche to execute people they run across in their investigations.
Well, again, all these people that are, waving about the constitutional rights and, bitching about masks, all of a sudden now are perfectly at ease with a woman being shot in her home in the middle of the night where no drugs were found. This is something that could have been handled a completely different way. We're talking narcotics. We're not talking about somebody that's under an imminent threat of death. That's a hostage situation or something like that. Let me again remind you of the Fourth Amendment quote from RBG, like her or not, for the rest of her stuff. She gets it right here that at no quarter does the Fourth Amendment apply with greater force in our homes, our most private space. So what we have to do now is balance these competing interests of such a fundamental natural right to be secure in your own home, for heaven's sakes, versus the state's interest in prosecuting the crimes of possessing or distributing drugs, which arguably is a victimless crime. It actually becomes violent because of the prohibition of these drugs. And, the first time I was on your show, Alan, a while back, you had asked me, where do you think things started going wrong with regards to government overreach? And immediately my first thought was when we decided, not when I say we, I'm talking about collectively, the people that want these laws, decided it was important to legislate morality. And from that, we get the drug wars. And then also in another case that we read about, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and this was the Mitchell case with warrantless searches. She was talking about the competitive nature of police and law enforcement. Look at civil asset forfeiture. Look what they get when they bring more in, and the benefits. I mean, this is an inherent built-in conflict of interest. And until this changes, we're going to see more of the same. As we were talking about before we went live, I said, did we learn anything from Rodney King? And you were quiet. I guess you were expecting me to have the answer. But the point being, no, because we're seeing this again and again and again, and not seeing any significant change with regards to these laws. Now we're seeing people coming out and the presidential candidate talking about defunding the police, which is moronic because he is one of the architects of civil asset forfeiture. But this is a movement that's gaining a lot of support. And the problem is, if we could scale back significantly amount of laws and issues that would require police law enforcement intervention, I submit to you, we'd see a lot less of this. How many people are harassed or getting pulled over for a sticker off of their car, their vehicle impounded? And that costs out here in Park City in Summit County, that'll cost you $2,500 if your sticker's outdated and they take your car away from you. How many people have been harassed in these situations and then have finally had it? And then you see people in your community getting shot, getting killed in their homes. And then they said, okay, just chill. Let's trust the system. And then garbage like what happened today happens.
Yeah. Well, I know that you and I before the show had discussed a little, kind of just thinking rhetorically about what some of the fallout of this could be. And again, the state knew what the potential fallout would be just as much as we did because they were boarding up their windows days in advance, so they knew exactly what was coming. But let's just kind of think, and we got to really be careful with our words here because goodness knows Suzanne's days are numbered on Facebook anyway. So I don't want to follow her into Facebook graveyard. But it seems to me that if people keep seeing on the news innocent people being gunned down, beaten, whatever, by the police. And and we're really making today about Breonna Taylor. Goodness knows there was a ton of other examples. And I would even be willing to meet the right winger part of the way and say, okay, maybe George Floyd wasn't the best poster child, although they still murdered him in the street. Maybe he wasn't, but you know what? Breonna Taylor was an excellent poster child, and they killed her too. And it just seems,
as was that Tatiana
Jefferson. It just seems to me that when people see this, and I know that obviously, this may disproportionately affect the black community and minorities, and I try not to make it a racial issue, but I know that this keeps happening. That when people see their neighbors being beaten or gunned down when they didn't do anything, I mean, you just can't hang anything on Breonna Taylor here. Then it seems to reason that more people are going to say, well, if I get assaulted by the cops, I should just fight back, because if I fight back, there's a good chance they'll beat or kill me. But if I don't resist, there's a good chance they'll beat or kill me. So if those are my options, I might as well just fight back. And I had said to you before the show, I think a lot more cops are going to die. And I'm not saying I endorse that, Zuckerberg. But I'm saying that I could see that happening because I could see a lot of people saying, fuck it. If this is what could happen to me if I run afoul of the law, then I might as well take my fate in my own hands and fight back. And that's going to result in more violence. So I guess first I'll ask you, does that seem plausible of an explanation to you, that we could see more cops being hurt or killed? And then also too, what is the one tried and true method the government always does when they're met with resistance?
Oh, they try to mend their evil ways.
You almost sound like you meant that.
Listen, I think we need to calm down, because the Attorney General there,
Mm-hmm.
He had actually said, and that's Daniel Cameron,
Mm-hmm.
he said, the decision before my office is not to decide the loss of Breonna Taylor's life if it was a tragedy. He said, of course it was a tragedy. So isn't that enough? He said, it's a tragedy. Can we just move on?
Yeah, exactly. It's I think a lot of people are very frustrated, and rightfully so, that the one officer that was charged because of wanton endangerment, because he shot too many bullets that went into too many other apartments near too many other people. None of the charges have anything to do with Breonna Taylor. She's not listed as a victim in the indictment. She was completely unpersoned.
I tell you what, if those wayward rounds had hit Kenneth Walker and Breonna Taylor and taken them both out, this would be one big nothing burger.
Yes. If they were both dead, this would be one big nothing burger. If the first officer had been a little bit more judicial with his marksmanship, then there would have been no charges, wouldn't there?
Exactly. Oh,
just something to consider.
Case closed.
I think that more people will get hurt, and what's very sad about this is that more people will violently resist more cops. And the state being what the state is means that they will double down with more violence on the citizenry, which will beget more violence, which will beget more violence, which will beget more violence. I'm not sitting here saying that that's what I want. It's absolutely not what I want. But I'm saying that I understand people that want to violently resist because they see things like today and they think, it's been 6 months and 10 days since Breonna Taylor died. And we all sat around and we sat twiddling our thumbs and we told ourselves, it's okay, let's let the justice system work. It's clear that it doesn't.
We already seeing before we went on the air, 3 officers shot in Louisville. And we just had 2 officers ambushed. Where was that? In Los Angeles?
Yeah.
2 SOs. So we're going to see more of this. And what's so sad is this could have been preventable if the state would just, for frick's sake, just back off on the victimless crimes, stop treating everybody like we're a frickin' ATM for the local coffers, and get out of people's lives to the extent that they're harassed. I can understand, when this happened after George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
regardless, whatever drugs he was on, as you said, he's not the greatest poster child. But my comment was, this is just the natural and entirely predictable outcome of a draconian police state. And for people that say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, they'll never hurt you. Tell that to Tatiana Jefferson. Tell that to Ramon Castile. These are people that were absolutely doing nothing wrong. I encourage people to read a book called Rise of the Warrior Cop by Radley Balco.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing you've probably read that. And also watch a movie called Police State. That actually took place Davis County, Utah out here. A gentleman stars in this. He was the youngest SO, I think, in the county's history, maybe in Utah's history. And he actually founded the Davis County SWAT. And that very same team that he was responsible for founding in that county, I beg your pardon, eventually killed his own son-in-law. And it's a really interesting examination, again, of the militarization of the police, of the force of these no-knock raids. I think if we can learn one thing from this at all, is no-knock raids, late night, these middle of the night, early morning, when people are in their beds sleeping, raids over freaking narcotics or whatever nobody's in danger right now. These have to stop. Also, I think, again, I'm not saying that that they have any blame here. Just from a purely tactical point of view, I also analyze this because we have tactics and
Mm-hmm.
plans in place. Sure. For the event that there's an invader in our home. I think anybody that wants to be prepared comes with that. And we've actually talked about that on my preparedness show, the Red Hot Chili Prepper. And, we were saying if somebody's breaking into your home, and my firearms instructor, the late, great Louis Auerbach, had said, what is the number one rule in a gunfight? And of course, this was at the end of a tactical shotgun class. And I raise my hand and say, win. And he just points his finger at me and yells, don't. If you can avoid it at all, don't get in a gunfight. So what's the lesson learned that could be happening here? Well, we did learn that she was shot in the hallway, meaning that there wasn't just a common area and then a door to their bedroom. So what does that mean? That means if there's an intruder in your house and you're operating under the assumption, we don't know who these people are. They have not announced to our knowledge that they are police officers. They have kicked down our door. We don't know why. They're in plain clothes. They're not dressed like law enforcement. Stay in your room, or if you've at least seen them, go in there, barricade yourself in. And I hate to say call the cops, but call so you have a record. 911, put that speakerphone on. Somebody is in my home. If they tell you there's a unit there, we need you to understand there's law enforcement. Doesn't mean what they did was right, but it can certainly diffuse the situation. And then in the event it is not law enforcement, you've got them coming down a funnel where there's only one way. If they try to get in that room, they're stuck going in through that door, and then you smoke them. But the way it is right now, he came out and he said he fired off a shot. He didn't really know what his target was. Know your target and what's beyond. So mistakes were made on both of these. He did hit. He didn't say, I saw somebody, I heard something, and I fired a shot. To me, that's not telling me he took aim and identified an intruder in the house. Going back and looking, how could her life maybe have been saved? By closing the door, not going out, and seeing what the situation is, assess. If it seems like somebody's still in there at the same time and it starts getting like it's more of a threat, then you have the home field advantage. You know where you can fire through a wall. You should know where you can fire through, where you can't, and protect yourself in the event that you can get law enforcement there, or else try to escape. If you can get out and live through the experience, do so. I thought that was a really important thing that needed to be addressed here.
Yeah, and we could be giving some token political commentary on this. I know that a lot of people have already been pointing out that it is so typical for every side of the political spectrum to be seizing on a moment like this and explaining why they're the answer. And I know that the left is going to be doing this it's in the same way that you've brought up the drug war. I urge people, you're not gonna save any future Breonna Taylors from happening by voting for Joe Biden and Kamala fucking Harris. I mean,
Right.
these are the champions of the system that got a dead Breonna Taylor in her hallway. They are
Yes.
the
Yes.
champions of that system. They are in no way incentivized to change it. They were totally incentivized to create it. So that's not going to do it. But at the same time, I don't really want to get too much into politics. I really want to keep the focus on Breonna Taylor herself. In that, I just there was something, and I'll let you have the floor after this before, and maybe we'll wrap up. Is that there was something that I had said all the way back in late March, when I did the full show of It's Too Late on Breonna Taylor, when that was still fresh in the national consciousness. I had ended the show by saying, I just imagine myself coming home. I live in South Nashville. The studio's down in Columbia. It's about an hour away here in Middle Tennessee, up I-65. And I just imagine myself coming home from the studio from work at, whatever, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, rushing home to get the episode home so I can get the stream ready, and pulling up and seeing police cars parked all over the place in front of our townhouse, and walking in and seeing our front door blown off of its hinges, and seeing my Anna Kay lying dead on the floor, and being told that, well, there was a raid and maybe they had the right house, maybe they didn't, maybe the warrant was wrong, maybe the cops were wrong, but she's dead. And I can imagine I wouldn't care too much about the details. I'd care a lot more that she was gone. And I would want to hurt the people that hurt her.
I think also what's got to be so infuriating for the family too, and why the detective Miles Cosgrave, who did not, he filed the fatal shot, but it was ruled justified, and that's why there were no charges against him. And what they said was he had no part of the planning.
Mm-hmm.
He was just following orders and followed established police procedures. How many frickin' times do we have to hear they followed established police procedures? Maybe it's time to change some of these established procedures. I know out here in Utah, the chokehold's actually been banned,
Mm-hmm.
but to say he was just following orders, really?
I know that there.
That would make you feel better if that situation, if that happened to your sweet Anna Kay. If he was following orders, the shooter didn't take any part in the planning of it,
Mm-hmm.
and the attorney general said it was a tragedy. I'm sure that would make you be
That would
okay
be
with
a
it.
very weak read. And I'm not going to name any names, but I know that you and I know some folks who they've looked at this case and cases like it, and that's sort of kind of what they've come to. Their conclusion has kind of been, well, it's a damn shame what happened, but I'm looking at the manual here and I'm looking at the law over here and I'm thinking, well, it looks to me like everything's up to snuff, but gosh darn, it sure is a shame what happened to old Brianna. And I got to tell
Yeah.
you, the people that are out there on the street that are pissed off, that are saying the system is broken and we want justice. They're not interested in their justice that they're looking for is not just, well, let's rewrite a statute, because Breonna Taylor's still fucking dead. You rewriting the officer's manual is not going to bring her back to life. So let's talk about some serious justice now. And I'm going to get myself banned. I know it's going to happen. I'm not trying to say that vengeance is the right thing, but I'm saying I understand it. I understand people who, when they get told by the attorney general, this is such a tragedy, but we've got to work the system, them saying that's not good enough. I'm just saying I understand it.
Didn't a football player a couple of years ago try to raise awareness to this issue? Didn't he try to ask nicely a while back? But everybody was so concerned and preoccupied with the fact that oh, he's disrespecting my flag. He's not standing for my national hymn. This could have possibly resulted in maybe some changes being made and prevented some of these deaths. But the law and order Americans have their values and their priorities, and changing this was clearly not enough. So you know what? Just expect more of the same. And if it ever happens to you, well, just know that the system will work itself out. And if it doesn't happen to you, but it happens in your city, wait for your city to burn, because we are going to
Mhm.
see more of this. And what could have been a few protests that might have started as some brush fires of freedom is now going to end up in more tyranny, more gun control, more surveillance, more police states. This is just a disaster all around. And then, so now imagine, let's say, let's say that officer bled out, he got killed. Kenneth Walker is woken up in the middle of the night with his
Mhm.
partner, and they hear, to their knowledge, somebody is busting into their apartment. Like any man should, he got out of bed to protect his woman.
Mhm.
Let's say he kills that officer. He was already charged. Yes, it was dismissed, but he was charged with attempted murder. Let's say the officer
Mhm.
perished, and now he is charged and he's convicted of
Mhm.
murder. What has Donald Trump said that he wants to see? The death penalty for anybody that kills a cop. So by sleeping in your bed at night, having your door kicked in, doing the right thing, and protecting your woman, you could be the subject to a lethal injection by the state.
Yep. It's the real tragedy here, other than, of course, the real tragedy is Breonna Taylor. The next tragedy is that every side of the political spectrum that seizes on this is not. None of those people are interested in liberty. They're interested in being right and getting the keys to the car. There's a lot of bad actors out there on the streets tonight that they're not interested in abolishing the system like you and I might be. They're interested in rebuilding it in their image, and that's very much a different motivation than what you and I would have. And vice versa,
Right.
you're right. Then there's the right side of the political spectrum that, because this is what partisan politics does, you must be the enemy of the other side because that's what partisanism is that they will say that no matter what happens, I am on the side of the law, the authorities, my cops, and we live in the real world. They can all be wrong, right? Like in the real world, you can be wrong to just simply want to seize power and enforce your worldview on others. In the same way that you can be wrong to just simply back the blue. Um, I had made a post just a little bit before the show went on that if you're somebody that thinks that all white people are just inherently racist, then just unfollow me because you're just dumbass. And vice versa, if you think that Breonna Taylor was some kind of a drug dealer, and yes or no that she somehow deserved her fate, go ahead and unfollow me because hell's not hot enough for you either. That
You, you
I
know,
don't, and I was just gonna say really quick, and I'll let you take over. Is
yeah.
that I don't even. You and I had discussed this, and I told you I would be perfectly comfortable coming out and saying it. I don't even identify as a libertarian anymore. You useless cucks! I swear to God. So you got the left libertarians and the right libertarians, and I see a whole bunch of left libertarians saying let's march with BLM, and I see a whole bunch of right libertarians saying, well, but the letter of the law says that the cops were justified. And I'm like, I guess I'm just not a libertarian because y'all are full of
No.
shit.
I'm gonna leave me the Ethelonian. The sad thing also that's going to come about is how many people are going to hesitate when they really do need to do
Yes.
the right thing in the event of a home invasion. One of my favorite teachers for self-defense is Colonel Cooper, and he has a book called Principles of Personal Defense, and he's got 7 principles in there. Briefly, what they are decisiveness, aggressiveness, speed, coolness, ruthlessness, surprise. How many of these are you going to forego? Oh, I don't know, if that's a cop and I kill him, oh, that's I'm going to get in trouble. Now they're in, and your family is about to be killed because you hesitated.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So the last thing I saw, I don't want to get too caught up in all of these crazy ass breaking news reports. The last thing I saw is three cops that have been gunned down now in Louisville. One is stable. Two of them are currently in surgery. Um, oh, they're getting a little clever. So everybody knows that the rioters like to shoot off fireworks and shoot their sparklers at the cops. Some of them are shooting fireworks, and when the cops go towards the fireworks, real gunfire opens up on them. That is an absolutely. I'm not saying I condone it, Zuckerberg. It's a
Predictable. It's
predictable
predictable.
consequence of everything that's led us to this moment.
Absolutely.
Suzanne, do you have anything else in your notes? I feel like we've pretty well exhausted the Breonna Taylor specific part of the story. I mean there's really nothing else to say other than
May she rest in peace.
there's I obviously feel so bad for her and feel so bad for her family, but I also genuinely, even if they don't politically align with me, I genuinely feel bad for people that want justice for her and believe that justice comes from the same state that delivered the injustice. If they think that the ballot box, that the voting booth and their favorite politician is somehow going to change things, and I feel bad for them too because they're so wrong.
Right. They're just in for more
They
disappointment.
are. Do you have a final thought?
Thanks for having me on here.
Well, I'm sorry that it's just kind of a downer. Well, I'll have to have you on to talk about comic books next time, and then I'll have Mark come back on to talk about dead people. Um, that's just I don't know, guys. Thank you so much for kind of hanging out with us after the show. Like I
Yeah.
said, we had our show planned in advance, and even all the way up to this afternoon, I was thinking, well, we've got a perfectly good show here, and we wanted to take a week off. But as I have said several weeks now, when covering other instances of police brutality and murder, I want to quit covering it, but they just won't stop killing people. So
Well, I keep seeing the memes that if parents, went back to whooping their kids' asses, this wouldn't be a problem.
shit. But you know what? A lot of those same people see the government as their parent, and the police is whooping ass. That's
Exactly. Exactly. Don't you have a site for them to go to?
Oh yeah, so they can go to euthanasia.com/police brutality to get the information they need to make the right choice for them.
We're here to help.
Well, Suzanne, I'm gonna get you out of here on this one. I'm throwing a curveball at you.
Oh no. Oh, my internet went down.
Oh no 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 no.
Oops.
Okay, hold on, really quick in the live chat. Lal Durio says, "Can we go back to war with Iran?" I did actually see someone point out that I haven't heard anything about terrorism in months. Between COVID and police brutality, terrorism just went away. So I guess bravo pandemic. I don't know. I don't know.
I want to go back to seeing brooms standing up on my news feed.
Yeah. So have I asked you the one about grilled cheese yet?
I could pretend and say no and get the answer right.
No. Well, then that's not fair. We're not. That's absolutely not fair.
Is that the one about the melt?
Yes.
Is
Is
the
a
grilled
grilled
cheese
cheese a melt?
Absolutely not.
How dare you?
Because a melt has something else in there. I know. I got one right.
All right. Well, we'll let you out of here on that one, guys. Thank you, COVID.
We,
Sherry.
we could do one for Blake. Is Blake's animal a guinea pig? We have a lot of fun with Blake's farm animals. And I don't mean it in a gross way. I mean it like
Well,
in a
that's
language way.
Blake says stuff like that all the time, and he gets them. You know what, Suzanne? Just really quick, just for you, I'm actually going to pull up a picture of Blake's new animal and show it to you live here on the air. I had mentioned this in the show today, and then didn't show it. So I'm gonna see if I can find a good picture of this thing, and let everyone.
Well, one of them looks like a cross between a mule deer and a jackrabbit. Yeah, that's it, with raccoon paws. What the
Yeah,
hell
so
is
you
that?
can see it, but I'm gonna save it so that I can show it to everybody at home. Because what kind of expert producer would I be if I didn't show this to the whole world? Um, so bear with me. The people are still watching. Like, what the hell happened to this show?
This is like, are they ever going to shut up?
This is it. This is the last thing. I'm going to show you the new animal that Blake got. The new animal's not the kid, by the way. That's Blake's youngest son. So he went out and got one of these things. That is a Patagonian Mara. That's all. It simply is. That is a thing. And Blake has one, and I'm for those of you at home, remember March 20th, 2021. That's next year's live show at the studio. I'm on Blake to get him to have a petting zoo ready, so maybe he'll bring his Patagonian Mara for all of you to marvel at. But there you go. So we've ended the show on a high note.
Well done.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to whatever the hell the It's Too Late after show with Suzanne Sherman. And we will see you next week.